Thanks for joining us Behind the Frontline, a podcast providing timeless solutions to everyday workforce and workplace challenges. Frontline Training Solutions is an express employment professionals company, strategically placed between the workplace and the workforce with professionals standing by, ready to combat your unique challenges. Learn more about what we do at frontlineon.com.
Well, hello again, and welcome to another episode of Behind the Frontline with Frontline Training Solutions. I'm Nic Dampier, the creative director here at Frontline, and I am sitting in the studio today with Ryan Williams, the Ryan Williams, who's a leadership and team development manager at Frontline Training Solutions. And we just recently did a webinar last week called The Balance of Leadership, and it was a really well-received webinar, had a lot of really great feedback on it and a lot of really great points that you made. And so today in today's podcast episode, we're going to talk a little bit about that webinar with some follow-up questions just based on the content that he shared. I encourage you to go watch that webinar. It's free on our archive at frontlineon.com. But first, to kick us off, Ryan, I feel like we've been doing a lot of podcasts together lately.
Yeah, it feels that way.
It feels good.
It's not, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
It's a good thing.
These are the two best bearded individuals in the office.
That is true.
So today, Ryan, for those who didn't attend the webinar, give us your story and your journey into the leadership development and your leadership development, and then set the stage a little bit. What is the balance of leadership, and why is this model so critical right now?
Yeah, okay, my journey into leadership development. I would say it started by having what I would consider a very challenging or difficult leader, led in the nonprofit context and really struggled with my leader. I think they had great intentions. You'll hear that come up a lot, right? They had great intentions, but what was really challenging about that was their intention was not creating an environment where I felt like I was thriving, felt, how a way to say this, disingenuous or really hard for me to follow. And so that was kind of the launch into me realizing you can have great intentions, but still be a really bad leader. That will come up later as a theme for myself as well, the same to be true. But that was where I kind of had this realization that leadership, even though this was a very gifted individual, they're very gifted, very good at what they did, when it came to their craft or what they did and what their role was within the organization. But part of that role was leading people, leading a team. And that was kind of what instigated that aha moment for me was, I really want to dig into what effective leadership looks like. What does it mean to be a leader? What does it mean to be effective at it? What does it mean to want to be a good leader, but still not be a good leader? And so that kind of started, obviously lots of different experiences with leaders, attended really early on, straight out of high school, did a leadership intense 1-year intense experience. I was all focused on leadership. So it's really been a theme throughout my life, but it wasn't until later that I really started becoming interested in the study of it, and then led my own teams, but then was able to pursue a master's degree in organizational leadership, which kind of fine-tuned that. And so, yeah, and then my own experience leading various teams, trying to be the best leader I could be and failing, but growing and learning. And I think improving that over time.
Yeah, and some of that experience led you to other parts of the world, different cultures.
Yeah. So it led to leading in different cultural contexts, with different cultural values and communication expectations that we'd have towards each other. So there's a lot of different challenges that I had to experience and fall on my face and learn. And that's some of the best teachers, right? I think one of the best pieces I've ever read is to say you can't become an effective leader from sitting in a classroom or reading a book, right? You have to get out, try it, fall on your face, but reflect, learn, and grow. That's, I think, sometimes the missing piece is just experience on its own doesn't really make you a better leader. But yeah, those cross-cultural experiences and working on different kinds of teams, in different contexts was really helpful to start wrapping my mind around that.
Yeah, and in all of your learning and failing and learning and relearning, at some point along the way, it led you to a lot of what you discussed in the webinar. So let's talk about the webinar, the balance of leadership. Kind of walk us through the main idea.
Yeah. So the main idea is that there are two competing dynamics or priorities really within any leader's life, especially in the workplace or whenever you're trying to accomplish anything. And it's these two priorities of challenge, meaning challenge people to accomplish the goal, challenge them to stretch themselves and maybe go outside of their comfort zone or to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then competed with connection, building a supportive, relational, connected environment. And really, what we found is those two ideas or priorities are really competing with each other, right? So if you are very connection oriented or trying to create a warm, inviting environment, anytime you go and challenge somebody or push them or, that dreaded word accountable, talk about accountability, it really starts to feel like it threatens our connection.
Mm.
Uh, on the flip side, if I'm all connection and really only focused on connecting and building a warm, supportive environment or relationship, then we're not really potentially accomplishing much. We're not pushing people outside of maybe their comfort zone or challenging them to follow through or follow up with whatever that task or thing you need to accomplish is. So these are two competing things, and an effective leader has to learn how to balance both of them. Because if you have one without the other, you start to create an environment that is really unproductive or isn't oriented towards what we'd consider growth. So a leader is really someone who creates an environment of growth and sustained performance towards a goal. And if you don't, then if you're all challenge and you're no connection, you potentially create an environment of stress where, people might do the work, but it's a limited return. Right. I mean, we've lived in those experiences where our only environment was only ever somebody telling us what we did wrong. We were holding people accountable as we think about it. And so that's my only ever environment, but you don't have a relationship with me. You don't know anything about me. You don't know what I care about.
Mm-hmm.
You're not interested in supporting my needs. You're just interested in what you can get out of me. On the flip side, if you're all connection, but no challenge, we potentially create a very cozy environment where everybody is, happy and feels supported and connected and feels like they have warm relationships, but nothing really is accomplished. Or your potential top performers are looking around going, what's happening with these people? Why, like I'm working, to the bone, but doesn't seem like everybody is working as hard as I am. Why is that not being addressed? Why is that not being dealt with? And so you hear that all the time. Everybody wants somebody to hold somebody else accountable, not them, but somebody else. But you potentially create this cozy environment where people aren't challenged. And then there's kind of that third category we talked about, which is if you don't connect, we have individuals, or leaders that don't really connect with their teams. They also don't challenge. I kind of call that the laissez-faire, the hands-off leader. You're just kind of there as a task purveyor. You kind of see, but you're in your office. You're not really connecting with people. You're not really challenging people. Then you start to create a potential environment of boredom. And lack of clarity, right? Where nobody really is connected with. I don't know my boss. They don't know me. I don't feel supported, but also there's no challenge. We're not really accomplishing much. And those are typically supervisors or leaders who are doing a lot of the work themselves for various reasons. And they also aren't relationally oriented. So that's kind of a third option that, I've just kind of, we'll talk about this, is like gone in my office, closed the door, or I've left it open, but I'm there, but I'm really just focused on the task at hand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you had me thinking about a leader that I had one time that would, like, everything I did was wrong. Like, he would constantly on me. He would sit there and just yell at me. And then within like the next breath, he'd be like, "Okay, you want to go get some lunch?" I was like, "No, I don't want to connect with you now. You just yelled at me for the last hour." So you mentioned in the webinar 3 typical leaders. And in the webinar comments, we had a lot of people who were like, oh, I resonate with that. I resonate with this person. Kind of walk us through what those leaders are and how it related to what you just shared. And then follow-up question to that is, why do you think leaders drift to one side without realizing it?
Yeah. Okay. Now I'm going to have to remember the names. So there was Sarah,
Mark, and Alex.
Mark, and Alex.
Yeah.
These were fictitious people, but based on real life. So Sarah was your all challenge. She walked around with a clipboard and was pointing out everything everybody did wrong. And that was the primary kind of example, is the primary kind of interactions with everybody. There wasn't much, if any, relational connection. Sarah couldn't tell you what, any hobbies were or interests at work were of the people that she worked with. The people there were there to get a job done. That's all. That's all that mattered. That's all that the focus was. Mark knew everybody's birthdays. He made sure to personally connect with every person on his team on the floor, but really lacked the follow through when it came to difficult conversations, addressing underperformers, and Mark's top performers were looking around going, is anybody going to talk to these people? Like, why am I carrying all the weight? And then Sarah, right?
Mhm.
Sarah was the laissez-faire, kind of the, and we'll talk about
Alex. Did you already talk about?
say like Alex, not Sarah. Alex was the disengaged, just kind of, I'll be in my office if you need me. Everybody kind of saw everybody as an individual performer that should be autonomous and shouldn't need her, right? That's not Alex's role, was not to be there to support. Alex's role was there to go in their office and accomplish their own tasks. Really didn't. And I think for that individual, I didn't say this in the webinar, but I think that individual doesn't necessarily see that their primary role and function is responsible to the team or the performance of the team or the individuals on the team. They really still see themselves as an individual performer or really isn't leading the team functionally. So I think those are the 3. And why do we drift? Well, I discussed this in the webinar. I think it's underlying beliefs we have about who we are, what our role is one of the pieces. So what are our underlying beliefs that drive how we think about work and how we think about ourselves? The other piece is subconscious. Well, I think some of those are subconscious beliefs. Some of them are beliefs that have been shaped from models or people that we've watched how they've functioned. The other piece is kind of, and wrapped up in that is our personality, our preferences, what we particularly like, or how the shoulds. I always use the term like shoulds, and I think those are beliefs, but the shoulds around behavior. People should be able to handle and should only focus on the task. Work is for work. Why should we talk about our personal lives? Why should I have to connect with you personally or relationally? You'll find that there's certain people with that kind of personality style. I'm holding my disc mug today, and that's one of the reasons why I love that tool. It's one of the ones I gave at the end of the webinar. Why do we drift there? Because we're naturally wired to go there. And the problem is when we're naturally wired to go there, we that starts to form a lens in which we see the world. And it's so subconscious that we don't necessarily even realize it because we can't see through other people's lenses. It's actually more difficult than we realize to see life or work through others' lenses on how they would think or experience it.
How much of that do you think is generationally charged?
Yeah, I think this one inevitably comes up. I think part of it, I mentioned the models that we've seen and the underlying beliefs. I think on some level there has been a cultural shift around what work should look like. I think part of that is, we could talk about this for hours around our belief around work and what role it should play in our life. I think that's the shift that you've seen, and it's because of the financial landscape. It's because of what we've seen our parents go through and had a reaction to that, right? So talk about family members who have devoted their lives to a company, then the company was not loyal to them, right? All of those things that we've seen over the years. So it's those experiences and those models that we've seen has created this cultural shift. So yes, I think there is an element. The other piece that we often talk about is the shortage of people. So we talk about workplaces that are more connection oriented today than they once were. When I say connection, is the sense that our feelings matter, how we feel about work, how we feel about relationships at work. That's never, people have always had feelings. I don't know if we should be aware of that. Throughout history, bad feeling. How much have they mattered in the workplace? Well, today they matter more, yes, because we do recognize that is a significant influence over people. But also part of that is it matters how you feel about work because it matters if you're going to stay, because people have options. The less options people have, how you feel about something starts to matter less.
Yeah.
Right? Throughout much of work history in the United States, the worker didn't have a lot of power. Unions started to shift that. You've started to see the shift go to the worker. Well, why did the power go to the worker? It's simple economics. It's the demand of workers has gone up. There's a shortage of people. People have stopped having kids. And so there aren't enough people to replace the people. So it's simply, I don't think it's the character people have changed. I think it's that more, I guess, power has gone to the worker because they have choice. When you have choice, then employers have to start thinking differently about the type of environment they create, because people aren't necessarily going to put up with a purely challenge environment, regardless of what generation you are.
Yeah. And I mean, we've done webinars and articles and all sorts of things on just kind of the economic data that's coming out. And I mean, unfortunately, in terms of the workforce, it's only going to get worse.
Yep. Yeah. Check out those webinars if you're curious to hear more about that data, because it's alarming.
Now, in terms of, you mentioned, the connection, you shared that you thought you were a connection focused leader, but in reality, you were creating stress. So how often do you think leaders completely misread themselves? And what's the cost of that blind spot?
Yeah, I would say most of the time, it takes extensive work to really grow that awareness. I thought I was a connection-oriented leader, one, because I felt like I had good intentions. I felt I internally cared about the people on my team. I did not show it externally, and I didn't even realize it. And so examples of that I give is I really never went around and told my team they were doing a good job. The underlying belief is people shouldn't need that. People shouldn't need to be told they're doing a good job. They should know themselves that they're doing a good job, and that should be enough for them. I don't need anyone to tell me I'm doing a good job, so why should they? Well, going around and thanking and giving specific appreciative feedback or supportive feedback is a form of connection. And actually, if my boss came and told me I was doing a job, I'd very much appreciated that. And so,
You're doing a good job, Ryan.
thank you so much. So now it needs to be specific. Going around to our team and going, "Great job, everybody."
Yeah.
That's not super fulfilling. But if somebody comes by and says, "Hey, great job on the webinar. I really appreciate that. I thought it had such a great impact." Whoa, okay, that's truly supporting me. That's helping me see how my work is contributing to success. That's what we're looking for. I didn't go around and do that. Not because I didn't want to, excuse me, not because I didn't want to, but because I just didn't even have the awareness to do so. And even when I wanted to, I would forget. I would think, oh yeah, I know that's really important. But then I would just get so caught up in the work and so caught up on fixing what was going wrong. Because I saw my role as the protector of like the excellence of the experience or excellence of the product or whatever it was. That's how I saw my role. Not that I didn't think those other things were important. Not that I didn't think about talking about our personal lives wasn't important at work. It was just I didn't do it because it wasn't a part of my natural tendency. I also tend to think work is for work.
Mhm.
So I don't often think people should need those things. Uh, and so what I didn't realize was I was creating an environment of stress because there's a lot of people on my team who needed that sense of connection. They wanted to know if I thought they were doing a good job or not.
Yeah.
They wanted to get to know their coworkers and me on a deeper level, or a level where, we weren't so afraid of each other to be open and honest about how things were actually going, either at work or at home or whatever. They wanted that, they needed that, and I didn't do any of those things.
Yeah. And I mean, it takes a certain level of self-awareness to be aware of what your team needs and how you're not fulfilling that, right?
Yeah, and like fighting those habits, those natural inclinations. And so one of the examples I gave that I would do is I literally put in my calendar, uh, go around and tell 3 people they're doing a good job today. If I didn't do that, I would genuinely forget. I would just get so caught up in the day to day. And what's funny is, you say, "Oh, well, I'm a millennial." There's this underlying belief that I don't think is true. Again, I think it's personality driven. You talk about what do generations have to do with all this stuff. I don't think people should need all this appreciation and praise in the workplace.
I think it varies person to person, right?
100%. It's not a generational thing as much as we like to believe that it is. That's has the orientation of our organizational culture been more open to that for individuals who want it or need it? Yes, they have. But I think maybe that'll shock somebody listening. Is like, I'm not a boomer, right? But I don't think that people should, or didn't believe, I should say. I do understand it now. They need affirmation and they need appreciation. They need supportive feedback. I know I want it
Mm-hmm.
uh, at different points. So I think that's important to think about when you think about connection. It doesn't mean you have to be best friends. It doesn't mean you have to share all of your lifelong secrets with the person, right? It's connection is I feel supported and valued. I feel like my leader cares about me.
Yeah. And I mean, it definitely varies because there have been times where I've received group public praise and it's just like, hey, great job on that. Doesn't really mean much to me.
No, you don't feel supported. You don't feel cared for.
I appreciate it's okay.
It's fine.
I don't need that.
Mhm.
But then there's times where it's like, hey, Nick, you did a really good job on this podcast episode. We've seen so-and-so come out from this and conversations and the dialogue was incredible. And it was just a little bit more intentional. And that to me is like, hey, thanks for taking the time to recognize that. And then, there's also like different levels of appreciation. So it's like, maybe this person appreciates more time at the table. Maybe this person just appreciates a higher pay bump. Maybe they appreciate gift cards or time off, or maybe just, one-to-one conversations with their leader. What do you think at the core, you're saying leadership is that constant tension between connection and challenge, but why do these feel like competing forces instead of complementary ones?
Yeah, because supporting and caring for people requires us to slow down and listen. And challenge typically is us pushing and pushing and pushing,
Mm-hmm.
and or difficult conversations feel like uh, sometimes a threat to connection, or uh, supporting someone sometimes requires us to uh, stop and think about what that person needs, not just what the organization needs. And those are often, I mean, you ask like the perfect tension is like the work from home debate, right? In our workplace, working from home works great for the individuals, but a lot of organizations are starting to reevaluate and question that. Does that work for us as a company? And those are competing ideas. Is like, how much can we give people what they want, and still get what we need as an organization? Those are often competing priorities. Another good example is like I have a really good relationship with you, Nick, a stronger relationship than I do with, let's see, I don't know, somebody else in the office.
Let's say Mark. It's one of the
Yeah.
examples you gave.
Mark, I have a stronger relationship with you, so then I want to, because that stronger connection, I feel this sense that I want to give you the benefit of the doubt, and I want to give you an exception, but then address Mark in the same breath.
Mhm.
And so that requires a lot of energy and effort to make sure I'm maintaining connections with each person on the team, and then, but also holding that in balance with challenging them or maintaining the standard regardless of the relationship.
Yeah, that's a
And
great point.
and I think a lot of leaders really struggle with that. One of the little scenarios we do in my leadership classes, and people catch it. One of the friends of the new boss's boss comes into his office and says, actually, it's Sarah. Sarah's really like screwing stuff up, really messed me up and all this stuff. I need you to talk to her. And then the boss goes, sure thing. I'll add that to my checklist on my next one-on-one, without questioning that assumption or that belief that his buddy just came to him with, and then just goes and addresses it with the other direct report. So
Mhm.
that connection turns into trust, and then that trust leads me to go challenge this person without hearing their side of the story.
Mhm.
And so all that connection, talk about connection, support, caring, all that stuff. Because of that, I go and address it. And people realize, oh, that's favoritism. Oh, yeah, that's favoritism. How often does that happen in the office where we don't really stop and listen to this person because we don't feel a sense of connection to them? And that's where personal bias and assumption plays into this. As a leader, you have to connect with people uh, and do due diligence to be as equal as you can
Yeah.
with your connection and support. And so I think that's why those are often competing, is because it's hard to sustain both of them at the same time.
So I'm gonna shift gears here for a second. So you broke down in the webinar the underlying beliefs, like people should listen to me because I'm the boss. And I'm sure you've heard that at home. Well, maybe not at your house, but you listeners at home have probably heard that in your workplace. Um, what's the most dangerous leadership belief you see today that is quietly sabotaging our teams?
One of the biggest things, and I'll have to go back from the behavior and kind of go back to the belief, is kind of passivity. Uh, I see a lot of managers or leaders feeling like they don't have the authority or ability to create change. They focus a lot on the things they can't control and not on the things they can.
Mm.
I think that's come up. I go to organizations and do these leadership programs within them, and it's a lot of like throwing our hands up in the air, going, "Well, my bosses or theirs," and there's a lot of kind of belief that everything's kind of wrapped up in the external, and there's not really recognition of what we can control or what we can influence. And so the underlying belief there is I'm a victim of my circumstances, right? As a leader, uh, and there's not really a lot of focus or energy put on, well, how can I better connect, and who do I need to challenge, and how can I, step into this role, and then, it brings us to some of the other points we're going to talk about. Is the primary focus then is, well, I need to control this, right? I think there's not a orientation or a focus on um, how can I influence people. It's how can I control the outcome.
Hmm.
And so and for various reasons, and it's not always because they need to control the outcome of the task or the situation, or sorry, about the task. Maybe it's the situation. I need to control this because I feel uncomfortable. Like, I don't want to go give difficult feedback because I can't control how the person's going to react
Hmm.
to that. Or I need to control exactly how this task is done, how this report is done. Why? Because, well, that's the way we've always done it.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of focus not on real leadership, as we would say. There's a lot of when we think about leadership, we think about influence, and that goes back to this model. How do you influence people? Well, you connect with them effectively. You figure out, how do I support you? What do you need? How do I show that I care about you? But then also, when the time comes, I need to have the direct, honest, challenging
Mhm.
conversation. And so I think, maybe I rambled there a bit, but to bring it all together, I think there's this belief that this is all going to happen through passivity, uh, that people shouldn't really need, quote unquote, leadership. And it's not really on me, it's on somebody else. And I've seen that mindset and attitude all the way up the the org chart,
Mhm.
up to the C-suite.
Mm.
Somebody goes to them, somebody in the C-suite, and say, well, I don't know. I'm not the person to ask. I'm not the
Yeah.
person. Instead of going, well, how can I influence? What can I do? Who do I need to connect with? What kind of challenging conversation do I need to have? Well, I don't know. And it's just kind of a passivity that the underlying belief is, well, I can't control this, so uh, I guess there's nothing I can do.
Yeah. No, I think that's super interesting. You mentioned something in there that's one of my biggest workplace pet peeves, and is the statement of that's just the way we've always done it.
Mm,
My response is always, we'll do better. Since there's always a creative solution to whatever problem lies in front of us. I think what you said is so interesting, and it got me thinking about other leaders in my life who actually display that balance of leadership really well. Because it's almost like, we've talked extensively before about the balcony and the dance floor, and I want you to
mm,
talk about that in a second.
mm-hmm,
But there comes a time where they are directing tasks and they are, delegating well and they are managing the outcome. But then there's the time where they're connecting and they're almost like no longer leading but serving and saying like, how can I serve you to do your job better? And I'm thinking about one person in particular right now. It's Nathan Lehman. If you're familiar with our podcast
yeah.
and our webinars before, you would know who he is. But Nathan, to me, always really displayed that well, where at one moment he's delegating, he's talking about tasks, and the next moment he's saying, but how can I serve you to get that done? And so Nathan, if you're watching that, thank you for being a good display of the balance of leadership. But let's talk about that concept, the balcony and the dance floor. And we do have articles, we have podcasts, we have all sorts of things on this concept, but I love it. Maybe we'll do a webinar just called the balcony and the dance floor. I think a great one.
Right.
But talk about that a little bit and how that kind of plays into this balance of leadership between connectedness and challenge.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to their two competing ideas, right? The dance floor is the place of empathy and connection to the work. You talk about connection, like I know what it's like down here because we always, when I talk about this with leaders, I always talk about going to like a concert or a show, right? The It's not really dance floor; it's the you're in the front and center of all of the action, and it's sweaty and gross and dramatic or emotional, and you're caught up in all of that. It's where everything is happening. And then up on the balcony, or in my world, the nosebleeds, right? You can see the big picture, but you're disconnected. You're disconnected from the madness of the dance floor. They're competing ideas. Up on the balcony, you're disconnected. You see the big picture. On the dance floor, you're in it, and you know what it's like, and you're doing the work.
Yeah.
It's the reality of the barriers and the challenges that you face in the day to day, and dealing with the clients, the customers, the faulty equipments, the processes that are ideal but don't really work. Right from the balcony, you have these ideal processes and all these things, but you've lost potential connection. And so we talk about what happens if you only lead from the balcony. Well, for many leaders out there, you have the risk of only leading from the balcony and not getting on the dance floor. Well, what happens? Well, we become disconnected. We start to make decisions disconnected from reality. We start to lose connection with the people and what they want and need. But if you're only on the dance floor and have lots of connection and empathy for the people, and you potentially become a firefighter, right? Another analogy is on the dance floor. It's like you put out fires. On the balcony, you start to think about, why is this fire happening in the first place, and how can we stop it from happening in the future? There's so many different ways this analogy works. So hopefully you're seeing the connection between that and the balance of leadership. Is it is a balance. If you lead from one or the other, you potentially have bad leadership. Because if you're leading from the balcony, you're making decisions that aren't connected to reality, and you leave people behind or create an environment where people don't feel supported. If you make decisions from the dance floor, or you lead from the dance floor and you never get up on the balcony, you're potentially giving people whiplash, right? You're making a decision to meet this immediate need without evaluating the long-term implications. And that's no environment anybody wants to live in, is we're just making reactionary or only ever putting out fires. And then you look at the culmination of all these decisions you've made, and you've gone nowhere. You've gone in circles, or you've solved initial problems, but not really the long term one. And think about how much money we waste, or the type of potential chaotic environment we create for people. Another example, I was working in an organization, we use the language, a triage environment. We triage for the short term, we stop the bleeding, but we never create long-term solutions. So that connects to the balcony of the dance floor, because from the balcony, we tend to think about it as the world of challenge. I'm disconnected, and I have this end goal, so I'm going to challenge and push people to reach that long-term, big picture goal. On the dance floor, I'm connected to the work, and I'm empathetic and understanding and supportive, and jump in where needed to make sure that people know I'm there, and that I'm supporting their work.
Yeah.
And yeah, you run the risk, if you become disconnected from one or the other, you start to become an ineffective leader.
Yeah. And would you say, let's say you're on the balcony, and at what point would you say, I need to get into the dance floor, or maybe you're on the dance floor, at what point you're like, I probably need to get into the balcony? If it's a balancing act of running up and down those stairs, is it just having a really good pulse on your team? What would you say is like that awareness that I need to get my head in a different space right now? Or is it just constantly walking in between both?
Yeah, I think it probably depends on the role that you play within an organization. I think the higher you get up in an organization, the more time you're inevitably going to spend on the balcony. Your risk, your danger is becoming disconnected from the dance floor. You inevitably are going to start making decisions or doing things if you don't intentionally, periodically go and get down on the dance floor and figure out what's it really like down here? What are people experiencing?
Yeah.
That's conversation. So practically, that's conversations with people, asking them, what are you seeing? What are you experiencing? How do you actually use this thing, whatever it is that you're talking about, or issue that you're looking to address? If you're on the dance floor and you live in that space, or if you're a frontline leader, your risk is to only live on the dance floor.
In the triage.
In the triage state. So for your frontline leader, it's 10-15 minutes every morning thinking through, what are my most critical priorities today that aren't urgent or fires? Like, what are things that are important but not urgent? Like, I need to be thinking about, how's my team working together? That's doing like a team building activity. Is like, this is why, it's hard to make any of that ever happen, because it's important, but it's not urgent, right? One of the matrix we use is the Eisenhower matrix, or priority matrix, to start to think about, where am I spending my time, and am I really only living in the fire, putting out fires, or am I stepping back and thinking about what are the most critical things I need to do that aren't putting out fires? That are going to help my team thrive, that are going to help the organization thrive, they're going to be long-term minded.
So it's like implementing that margin time into your day-to-day.
Yes. And when you spend time on the balcony, you start to show up differently on the dance floor, right? When I talk to a lot of leaders, when they step back and go, okay, what are the long-term goals? What are we trying to accomplish here? Why do these fires keep starting? Right? Instead of asking, how do we put the fire out? Go, okay, but what's causing them in the first place? Doing that problem solving. And then when you get on the dance floor, you have this mindset that you show up differently. Instead of just jumping in frantically doing the work, you're observing your team and how they're functioning, and how they're working together, and thinking about, okay, so what do we need to do to accomplish or overcome some of these obstacles?
Yeah. That matrix that talks about good, neutral, good, chaotic, good, chaotic, whatever it is. In my head, maybe I'm leaning more towards chaotic neutral, but in my head, I was thinking about if you are on the balcony and you have more of a long-term mindset and you know what the goals are and you know where we're going, but then you're down putting fires out, how often would you let fires happen knowing that it doesn't play into the long-term goals? You know, I don't know if you got a response to that. Maybe just revealing that I might be the villain in a Batman movie.
Wait, explain that. Or
So like if you're on the balcony and you know what the long-term goals are. So let's say we have A, B, and C, but then I need to go down to the dance floor and I need to put out some fires. But maybe that fire actually could be a good thing because it doesn't play into the long-term goal. Would there ever be a point where I'm going to step back and say, I'm going to let this happen?
Yeah, I think if you have some intentionality, and I think about my, when I would step back on the balcony to think as a leader, what's my role and function? Is it to be a task doer or is it to be a leader and developer of people? If my job is to be a task doer, I'm inevitably, or if I believe that's my role, or if I am only on the dance floor, I'm not really evaluating and thinking about what is my function and how am I going to bring the most value to this organization. If I believe it's to be the expert to jump in and solve everybody's problems, I'm going to jump in and put out the fire. If it's to be a trainer and developer and or of people, then I might step back and go, let's watch it burn.
Yeah.
Because that's sometimes the impetus for change is people start to feel the pain, they feel the heat, and then we step in and do an after action review. An after action review is how did it go? What went wrong? What can we fix next time? And so that's getting on the balcony and thinking about like how things went and reviewing and I think that's, as leaders, we don't do that often.
Yeah, there's different, processes for SWOT analysis.
Yeah, different ways to step back and think about how's it going? What do we need to do differently? How do we need, and so sometimes people need to right, for change. When we talk about change, people need to feel the why, the heat. And so I might go, yeah, if somebody's life is at risk, I'm going to jump in and if there's truly a fire, then we're going to step in actual fire. And I was starting to feel like a Batman villain. Yeah, we don't want to put people's lives at risk. No, but sometimes if I'm thinking about my role as a leader is sometimes, think about some of our best teachers is when things go horribly wrong. And if somebody steps in, this is where the challenge, talking about the connection challenge. If I'm all connection, it makes me uncomfortable that other people are uncomfortable. And so I'm going to jump in and bail them out.
Let's give a real world example of that. So let's say you're on a line and someone is falling back in their production line or whatever it is. And they just can't quite, maybe they're not fast enough. Maybe their hands aren't working fast enough. Maybe they're just not thinking through all the possible scenarios. And if you're more connection, you're probably that type of leader that's going to step in and do it for them.
Potentially. Yeah. You're going to accommodate them and accommodate. And then are we going to have the conversation to go, okay, what's happening? Yeah. What's going wrong? Is this the right role for you? Like, not saying we necessarily need to get rid of, this individual, because if I'm all challenged, I'm like, you're fired. Right. If I'm connection, I'm like, I accommodate. I'll jump in or I'll make.
But that's we have so-and-so down the line saying like, I'm doing double the output.
Yep.
Why?
And I'm being held the same, and all. Yeah, exactly. So why isn't this person held to the same standard? All of that. And so if I'm connection and challenge is maybe I'm jumping and I'm helping for a bit. And I'm going, all right, we're going to have a conversation about what's going on. Is this the right role? What's getting in the way? Of you speeding up or accomplishing what you need to accomplish. And yeah, maybe it's, this isn't the right role for you. Maybe it's, I have my focus split. I'm thinking about what's going on at home. Talk about bringing feelings into the workplace. They do the part of that, I know that we've gotten that question over and over again is like, well, how much do we need to connect or care about people? Well, do your emotions affect you? Does it affect how you show up at work? Yes, it does. And so somebody that balances in that scenario, connection and care, I go, hey, what's going on? Where are we getting hung up? What's these? But then I follow up and I say, okay, this is what we agree upon. You're going to speed your work up.
Yeah.
And talk to me about what you're going to do to make that happen.
That's a great point. I think it also falls down on value. I don't think there's a single person who doesn't want to be valued
Mm-hmm.
in what they do.
Yep.
And so maybe it's not necessarily like feelings are the driving motivator for every person, but they definitely want to feel valued in their contribution to the company.
Yeah, I think we oversell this idea when you think about connection of like accommodating people's feelings, so to speak. I mean, we use the word feel valued, but that is a critical factor for people in the workplace, is to feel like their work is meaningful and or they are valued in the workplace. That is going to be probably, if not the highest, driving factor of engagement of performance.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we spent some time talking about, your employer brand and stuff too, and how to kind of help attract the right people and repel the wrong ones. And a big part of that is belonging and impact. And will I make an impact in this organization? Will what I do matter? Will I have purpose here? Will I belong? But we're not going to talk about employer brand right now. I do want to shift gears a little bit. You mentioned this myth called the open door policy myth. And that was the first time that I had heard it. You called out something a lot of leaders say proudly, my door is always open, is actually passive leadership. So why is that such a dangerous illusion for leaders?
Yeah, the act within itself is not inherently wrong. I think that's where the balcony of the dance floor starts to also crystallize. If you're not out walking the floor, out where the work is happening, out seeing, hearing, feeling what it's like, and you're up in your office somewhere, then you're potentially creating a disconnect. And there's not proactive, no, let's meet in your space. No, let's see how things are going with you. Let's actually see the environment, experience the environment. I think that's part of it. I think the other piece is the assumption that people are going to come to you when they need you, when they actually need support. And the reality is that's not going to be the case. As a leader, we should be more proactive. Now, so saying my door's always open is not inherently bad. The problem is we think that is sufficient for connection. That's not proactive connection with people on our team. And again, connection isn't just we have a relationship where I know stuff about you. It's I'm leading with a caring, supportive approach. And so it's hard to care and support for people if we don't see their world, understand their world. And so being more proactive and getting out of your office and not just inviting people to yours will help you be more effective at connection. Having a door open, allowing people to come see, that's important. Don't hear that you shouldn't do that. It's just that's not sufficient to be effective at connecting as a leader.
Yeah. So when we're as a leader who needs to connect more with their team and maybe they don't have a normal cadence of one-on-ones or something like that, which you definitely should. I mean, that is a well-known thing, have one-on-ones with your people. But a big part of that is feedback. And you shared that many leaders believe they're helping by giving constant constructive feedback, but it can create disengagement. So what does healthy feedback actually look like in practice?
Yeah, I think a couple things. I mean, you'll hear us say, beware the love sandwich. We'll start there. If you're not familiar with what I mean by that, it's let me say something positive to you. Let me fit in the criticism, and then let me follow that up with something nice. Typically, when you ask somebody, it's like, well, what did you hear when I delivered that feedback? Oh, well, I'm balancing, right? There's the belief, and this is why understanding these things can go a long way. Well, I'm balancing care and challenge, right?
Yeah.
It's like, well, what did they hear when they walked away? Well, did they hear all the positives and ignore the negatives? And a lot of times we do that because we don't want to look like the bad person, because it's easier for us to give criticism or or constructive feedback, if we butter them up first because we don't want them to feel bad or because we don't want to look like the bad person or whatever. So when you think about challenge, is like, hey, no, right now is a time to challenge. I challenge because I care about you and the issue or the whatever it is. And then I'm just going to get right into it. Here's the specific situation. Here's what the action that was taken. Here's what it did. Here was the impact of whatever that thing is. Right. So when I talk about criticism, I think a lot of times what people say about their leader is like, we do the love sandwich. And so then the only time my leader ever gives me positive or supportive feedback is when we're waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So if I say and I did this, I made this mistake as a leader, because I didn't naturally go around and give positive, supportive feedback to my team, disconnected from any criticism, my team started to see that the only time I said something positive about what they were doing is because I was only buttering them up to say the criticism.
But what else, Ryan?
Yeah. And they're waiting for the but. And then they walk away going, they don't hear any of the positives, right? We've just basically drowned out any of the sense of connection or the sense that my boss sees me and supports me by throwing in supportive or positive feedback on each side of a criticism. And so a recommendation is don't try to butter them up. We're really only doing that not because we care about them and we want them to succeed. We're doing that because we want to not feel bad, or sometimes we don't want them to feel bad, but it's helping them not feel bad. They're no longer hearing the positive.
Yeah, I think about
feedback.
Gardening sometimes, and like you could see a plant growing in your garden that you're like, it's finally growing. This is great. Like it's growing. But sometimes in order for it to grow healthy, you got to prune it a little bit. You got to cut some stuff back.
Yep.
And that's just healthy growth. And we have a lot of models. We follow the SDI.
Yep.
Emerson
Behavior.
And we have, trainings and articles and, webinars, all sorts of things on feedback. So please go peruse our website. You'll learn a lot about that. But I've always been told to praise in public,
Correct
in private.
Yes.
And I think there's something really valuable from a leader pulling you aside and say, hey, can I give you some feedback? Because they care about your growth. They care about the mission of the organization, but they care about you as a person. And so it's not like hey, Groot, this is how Ryan messed up today.
Right.
Ryan, this is what you should have done differently. No, it's hey, Ryan, can I give you some feedback real quick? I noticed in this, progress report, you didn't quite meet these needs. I think if you did this differently, or what would you say? What would you think could be different?
Would you solve the problem?
How could you solve this problem?
Yeah.
There's a lot of value in that, and it really makes the person feel valued, that my leader cares enough to see me grow.
Yeah. And one of the, there's lots of, we want to beware. I was talking to a leader, and they were very specific about the way that a report needed to be done, but there wasn't really a clear why. It was just like, well, this is how, talking about this is how we've always done it. And the individual, I guess, pet peeve. Yeah. And the individual was kind of pushing back on that. And they're a relatively newer employee, and the employee didn't really understand the why. And also the supervisor didn't really have a good reason. There was no reason. The way that the employee put together the report was seemingly fine according to other people. They, of course, went and said, they're going to start asking other people like, hey, does this look fine? Does this look good? And they go, yeah, it looks good to me. But the boss doesn't like it. Right. And it's like, well, do we have shared expectations that we're working together towards, that we're solving a problem that is going to meet the need, as well as, we talk about buy-in from the person. Again, the goal is to meet the need and the standard. We just need to be mindful that the standards on some level need to make sense.
Right.
This person actually found a more efficient way to do the report that everybody but the boss agreed, and the boss's reason for it not being to the standard was that it wasn't the way they've always done it.
Yeah.
And so that was like, okay, now we're just trying to control, and we want compliance and not commitment. Can we relinquish oh, that's the way we've always done it, and really value and say, no, that meets the need. And actually they found a more efficient way to deliver these reports, which was so fascinating to me. And it was really hard for the supervisor to like step away from that, because they kept saying, well, but I'm the boss. And this is how my boss always did.
Yeah.
And it was hard for them to let go of that idea.
I mean, that's such a tough thing to let go of too. Yeah, man, that was good. So let's do a little bit of a shameless plug here. You talked about how leadership training often fails because knowledge doesn't equal behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned earlier in this episode about your leadership training. Maybe talk a little bit about leadership foundations and how you talk about this, and maybe even like, do you have any positive feedback from a leader who's gone through the training that's been like, wow, this clicked, their aha moment?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So talking about why a lot of times leadership training doesn't work is because we can't, it's like, oh, I'm going to plug leadership foundations, but really you can't learn to be a leader, or you can learn to be a leader. You're not going to be an effective leader if it stays in the classroom. Right. So
You have to put it into practice.
you have to put it into practice, and you also need feedback. The best example I give is I can go and practice golf the wrong way forever unless I get feedback. What are the two ways I get feedback? Well, one, the ball isn't going the direction that I want. It doesn't look right. The other is I have a coach behind me saying, hey, here's why it didn't go the way you want it to. Because the problem is a lot of times I know I'm not swinging the correct way, but I don't know how to fix it. And I need, if we translate that, because that's how we build true skill and effectiveness is, I know that I'm doing it wrong, but I don't know how to fix it.
Yeah.
So that means I have a knowledge deficit or skill. I haven't developed the skill, to fix it. And so why leadership foundations, or why do we design a lot of our programs the way we do? It's because we do sessions between weeks. And the idea is that you walk away with something that you go back and practice, and you are hopefully getting feedback or seeking out feedback, or you come back and say, hey, this is how it went. And then you share it with your colleagues in class, or your whether we do it in-house in the company, which can be really powerful. So say, hey, this is what I tried. Here's how it went. Didn't really get the result I wanted. Or sometimes it's, I honestly didn't get to it because I just let myself get caught up in the business of work. Okay, so what got in the way? It's really that simple practice of going, all right, what are you committed to at the end of class? And then what are you going to commit to coming back and telling us next week on how it went?
Yeah.
You need that rhythm. The social aspect of it is really helpful as well, because when you get back, somebody's going to be like waiting to hear how did it go. They also choose what they want to put into practice, so there's the choice. And so that's, I think, a really important component. We do a start, stop, continue. What are you going to start this week? What are you going to stop? What are you going to continue? And people come back and share stuff they've actually done, and it's revolutionized like what they've approached. And then suddenly it just becomes this snowball effect. It's like, wow, there's this thing, and I actually am getting feedback, and it's actually working. And then suddenly the motivation is there on a new level, and it just builds and builds each week. The hard part is when those 5 weeks are over, like, does it sustain?
Yeah.
That's the challenge I always put back to organizations is it's hard for us to build habit,
Right.
especially when we're working actively trying to work against our natural inclinations or our natural orientation.
Yeah. I mean, with even the golf analogy, which was incredibly relatable, I've had golf instructors behind me tell me you're doing great, and then I hit it 90 degrees to the right.
Yeah. Yep.
But if you did all the training and everything with that, but then after it was done, you went back to playing the same way. I mean, yeah.
We've never golfed.
We've never golfed together. Maybe that's the next step.
Yeah. Well, I think part of that too, as I talk about this, is you learn a great knowledge. You watch these great videos, You read these great books on, we'll say, leadership. So you have all this knowledge, but skill only comes from practicing it, right? But then you get out on the golf course
Mm-hmm.
and you shank it.
Yeah.
Why? Well, suddenly there was this pressure, like this is my only shot. I don't get to just put another one up. Like this one's going to count. This one counts. And out of that stress and concern and fear or whatever, you shank it. And it usually takes me by the third or fourth hole to get feeling like, oh yeah, okay, this is going to be okay. And the stress dissipates and I can actually do what I've been practicing.
Yeah.
And so that's what I call habit, right? Is I have to work through the stress and the concerns and the fear and all of that stuff. But if I let all that get to me, then even all the best skill and knowledge kind of goes out the window. And I think that's a component that maybe we don't really think about and consider, especially when it comes to working with people and talk about feedback is a great example.
One question that we receive a lot, one of my favorite questions we always receive is, how do I get my leader to hear this or put this into practice? And I think, feel free to speak into this. I feel like a good response is, model it. Starts with you. Effective change and leadership starts with you. If you hear something that you can apply and put into practice, then do it. And that kind of positive change spreads.
Yep.
What would you say?
Yeah, we have seen that happen. So for those of you that are listening to this, asking that question, let's go back to that question of like, I'm pointing the finger at everybody else but me, kind of thing. We have seen that happen where leaders within organizations have seen such a change in somebody that suddenly were in their organization doing leadership program for their boss and, the entire organization, which is, they talk about one of the testaments to like leadership development and leadership development that hopefully turns into behavior, right?
Yeah.
So we do see that happen. The other thing that I would say is I try to sell higher level leaders on is you have to define it too. Right. You're sitting there going, well, my boss is a terrible leader. Well, based on what?
Right.
What do you mean they're a terrible leader? What does that mean? Well, what do you mean by leadership? Like, what's the standard? Do we have a shared standard of what even effective leadership? Because they might be super blunt and challenging, but who's to say that's not a good element and that's not good leadership? Well, because your preference is connection. Right? Your preference is that they don't come and have a really blunt and direct conversation with you. Yeah, they're too far towards challenge, but I think, as many of us said, that used to be the norm, that used to be the standard. So in their mind, they're a great leader.
Yeah, I think one of the things you said a few minutes ago was about taking teams through training like that together, which I love when we get the opportunity to do that, because we have in-house training, we have open sessions, we have virtual trainings. But then what you do a lot is you go into companies and train teams together, which I think is so valuable, because if one or two people go into a training, they come back and they've absorbed it in their way and they can apply it in their way and they're kind of regurgitating it in their way. But when teams go through it together, it's like almost a shared cultural knowledge at that point.
Yeah, 100%. And we do see pretty significant feedback or outcomes where, you start to create shared language and you start to realize, oh, wow, we think pretty it's simultaneously a team building experience where it's like, wow, we think pretty differently and we have pretty different personalities and different ways of thinking about this. Now, depending on the group, different reactions, but part of that shared language, shared definitions is a big part of the challenge that you're probably experiencing in your organization. And so potentially the challenge that you're experiencing with your leader is, I've never met a leader that went off the bat, oh, I'm a terrible leader. And actually, I'm trying really hard to be a bad one.
Oh, we typically look at ourselves as chaotic, neutral.
Yeah,
let it burn.
We typically look at ourselves and go, no, I'm doing my best. I'm doing the best I can. And, what I'm doing has made me successful. So therefore, what I'm going to keep doing is going to keep me successful. It's like, no, we have to agree that whatever it is, and this is where leadership is so ambiguous. Like, what is good leadership? what does an effective leader look like? It's also ambiguous, that most of the leaders in the organization probably think, yeah, I'm pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the trainings that we've offered before for manufacturing leadership is we still offer it, operational excellence, leadership alignment for operational excellence. And what I like about that one is there's 3 different levels of leaders. You have the frontline, you have the mid level management, and then you have the executive C-suite. And so they're all coming together as a big group and learning shared language, but then they're also coming together as their own groups and defining. So like the executive C-suite, like they're defining what this is going to look like in our organization.
Yeah, and that's a big part of your challenge I think you're experiencing. And then, like, how do you have conversations around accountability around certain behaviors
Mm-hmm.
that we haven't even agreed upon are the effective ones?
Yeah.
And so I think, because that's where you leaning too far into connection of, well, this is my preference and that's their preference. That potentially creates a chaotic or impossible situation, for any leader if we where all connection turns into a cozy environment because we go, well, that's their preference and that's their preference and that's their preference. That's nearly impossible for any leader, any person to sustain. Everybody's cozy, but the leader is stressed.
Yeah. Yeah. So we could talk about this all day, but I have one more question for you, Ryan. If there's a leader listening today and had to ask themselves one brutally honest question about how they show up, what should it be?
Well, before I give a question, I'll start. You should need to start with the premise: the perception of myself is probably not accurate. So it's not really a question, but it's more of a underlying belief. Is the if I really want to find the balance of connection and challenge, I need to start with the premise that uh, my perception of myself is probably not accurate.
Feel like a 360-degree feedback.
Yeah. So start with that assumption.
Mm-hmm.
We are biased towards ourselves. We tend to see ourselves, and through rose-colored glasses, right? So start there. 2 is like, what are the actual behaviors I'm exhibiting
Huh.
that says I'm connecting with somebody? So what am I actually doing? Not, no, well, I intend to, or I mean to, or I'm generally a nice person. It's like, no, did I walk around and there's actually an assessment that is behavioral based that we provided for anybody that attended the webinar. Reach out to us if you're listening to this. Check out the webinar. We can send it to you. Send us an email. We'll follow. It's behavioral based. So, like, what behaviors am I actually exhibiting, and what's the impact that I'm seeing? Uh, and so, starting under the premise that I'm probably
Mm-hmm.
misunderstanding myself and how people are seeing or experiencing my approach.
Yeah.
So I think that would be the question. And so to give you an example of how that showed up for me is, it wasn't until I realized through feedback from one of my team members, one of my direct reports, that I just talked about myself most of the time during meetings, uh, during one-on-ones. I would jump in and give advice and not ask their perspective.
Mm-hmm.
That's another example of challenge versus connection.
Yeah, I don't think you've asked me one question this entire podcast.
That's a good point, Nick. Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, I think that's like, it's sneaky, right? Through my mind, I thought I'm being super helpful. I'm being super supportive as a leader by giving this great advice. And I had somebody sitting in front of me going, Nothing you just said to me was helpful." Because you didn't actually stop to truly understand what was happening. You didn't listen. You didn't understand what my actual challenges, my actual struggles were. You heard a little bit of the story. This is where my natural orientation comes. And then you jumped in and you gave these recommendations and these solutions that they walked away going, I'm not supported by my leader because they don't actually listen. They don't actually understand what my challenges, struggles were. And the solutions they gave me might have worked in whatever scenario or situation they were talking about, but they didn't even take the time to understand. all chat, let's chat, right? I'm pushing them towards this thing that I had in my head because I jumped to conclusions, and a connecting leader stops and listens.
Or
And-
asks feedback.
and asks for feedback and I didn't learn that until we kind of started this imperative that yes, we would give people on our team feedback, and we had a model that we would follow. But then in a follow-up conversation, we would ask for feedback. And he was brave enough to share that with me.
Yeah.
And he said, you tend to jump to conclusions. You tend to jump in and tell me what I need to do before you even understand what my actual challenges and struggles are. And I went, and he goes, hasn't really been helpful ever.
Yeah.
And I went, you little punk. How dare you say that I wasn't helpful?
Yeah. On our last episode, we talked a little bit about creating psychological safety for your team so that they can feel free to speak up.
Yeah.
But I think asking for feedback is a humbling experience.
It is. Hopefully they're brave enough to share it with you.
Yeah.
I was so grateful that he was.
Hopefully they feel safe enough to do that. But I've definitely gone down that road before where I feel like, man, I'm really killing it at this. I'm doing such a great job. Like I'm getting stuff done. But then I received feedback from someone one time that really affected me because they said, well, every time I come in your office, you just go like, I was like, I didn't realize I was doing that. You just kind of caught me off guard. I'm in the zone, you know? So I had to like start focusing on, what is my head saying? What is my face saying? And make sure that I'm visually, interested in what they have to say and not, just thinking about the work that I'm not doing right now. Man, this was good. Ryan, if you want to know more about this topic, go watch the webinar, reach out to Ryan personally, bring him into your company, have him train your team and your leaders and work on this shared language together of implementing a culture of feedback and just kind of navigating that balance between connection and challenge. And we have so many articles, we have so many resources on the website. We want to connect with you because ultimately our goal of Frontline Training Solutions is to develop people, inspire growth, and unlock potential. And we want to help you get there to become and stay an employer of choice where people feel valued and they want to stay and they want to help your company grow for the long term because you believe in them, right?
Right. I'll ask more questions next time.
Next time, maybe I will answer some of the podcast questions. Thanks so much for tuning in today on Behind the Frontline. We'll see you next time on the Frontline.